Alright. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2023. This is day 11. Something like that. So, today, I'm going to go on a little rant. And all of this rant is inspired by a YouTube channel called Dungeon Craft. If you are in the kind of RPG space in general on YouTube, you have probably seen their videos. They're very high quality. I disagree sometimes with some of the conclusions that they could come to on certain subjects. But overall, I think they're a pretty impressive channel. And the best part about this, you remember how I used to do those one-sided reviews with Matt Colville every so often? Or not one-sided reviews, one-sided argument with Matt Colville. Well, will never know that I was arguing with him. I think this is going to be kind of the same thing. And the best part about this is we're not actually arguing about something like an opinion that Dungeon Craft has. It is inspired a rant based on a single fragment of a sentence that was him referencing what an industry professional had mentioned as a reason why they weren't focusing on that aspect of tabletop role-playing games as part of their product. So if anyone's wondering, or Dungeon Craft, if you're actually watching this, first of all, you need to make better life choices. There are much better things you can do than listen to me ramble. But if you're watching, thanks. But I'm going to link his video, because his video is actually him talking about his experience at a recent convention, and the fact that he got a chance to play the new virtual tabletop that Wizards of the Coast is coming out with, and he actually talked to some of the people making it. It's actually a really good video. It gives a nice idea of what this new virtual tabletop is going to be, and I really like that. So if you are interested at all in what's going on with this virtual tabletop, watch it. It gave me a lot of really good information, but there is a throw-off line in there where they're talking to one of the people, or I think the head of the people that are making the virtual to the tabletop, and they just did this one-off line that was basically they were talking about how so much of what a DM does is translated through their eyes and their face, and the one-off line was something to the effect of, and you can't replicate that at a virtual tabletop. So they're not attempting to do that. I do not disagree with that justification for why they are focusing mostly on the virtual tabletop aspect as opposed to creating a video chat platform. I think that's a very, very smart thing to do. And again, from the video and everything that he talked about, I'm excited to see what the virtual tabletop turns into. I think it's probably going to give literally every virtual tabletop on the market is going to be giving a run for their money, which is a good thing. Competition breeds quality. We want Roll20 and what's the other one? It's on Steam, and I can never remember. It starts with an F, I think. Anyway, we want all the different virtual tabletops out there. We want them to up their game. We really, really do. Again, I use Roll20 Foundry. That's what it's called. I use Roll20 almost exclusively for my games because, first of all, I'm used to it. And second of all, it does what I want it to do without overcomplicating things by giving me stuff that I don't need. And that's why I like Roll20. But I still have to use a lot of other things in order for me to run games in Roll20. I buy all my books completely separately from Roll20. I've never intentionally purchased a book through Roll20. Now, I did get a Humble Bundle that gave me a bunch of rule books and stuff in Roll20, but I didn't purchase that through Roll20. I got it through Humble Bundle because it was a great deal. And just gave me access to a crap ton of RPGs. So I buy all my books other places. I make all my maps in Incarnate. I get most of my music through Roll20, but I will look for copyright-free music in a lot of other places to make sure that I've got everything. And any artwork and stuff that I use in my games, I have to get somewhere else because they don't really sell artwork there. So anything that's going to force them to either compete or go away, I'm good with. But that being said, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about this idea that you can't replicate the experience of an in-person D&D group online. It's just not possible, and therefore we're not even going to try. This is not a unique opinion to Dungeon Craft or the people over at Wizards of the Coast or really anywhere. This is just an accepted opinion across the tabletop gaming world. Is just that online gaming is always worse than in-person gig gaming, and there's nothing you can do to fix that. I have an entire series here where I talk about the various things that you can do to improve your online to the tabletop experience. And again, I have been running online to the tabletop games for almost a decade now. And for me personally, I physically cannot run in-person games due to my PTSD with agoraphobia. I literally cannot go somewhere to run a game. And inviting people over to run them causes other issues with things like social anxiety disorder and a bunch of other things that I have. So it's physically not possible for me to do that. And if I just accept what everyone else says, which is basically, well, then you just get to play the bad version of D&D. That would suck for me. And I 100% don't believe that because, again, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. I can tell you right now, I have had significantly more engaging and entertaining games online than I have had at a physical table. And for anyone going, well, you probably just haven't had, no. Again, I've been running things online for almost 10 years. I've not been running exclusively online for 10 years. Again, I was a local coordinator for the Adventures League. I used to help run a convention. At one point, I was in charge of all organized, I can't remember what they're called, all living campaigns, effectively, for a local convention. So Pathfinder Society, Shadowrun missions, and D&D Adventures League. All of the people that were running all of those games all reported to me. At one point, over a weekend, we were running, I want to say we were running almost 100 tables. It might have only been like 80. But yeah, we were doing that. And I have helped run at a lot of other conventions as well. I have run in-person D&D. I also used to run at friendly local game stores. I used to run entire programs at friendly local game stores and things like that. I've done a lot of playing in very intimate situations and at big, wide conventions style games where, you know, the next table over is only about 3 or 4 feet away and they're playing the same adventure as you are. I have a significant amount, and I used to run a home game as well, an in-person home game, and played in an in-person home game in my apartment. So I have experienced all of this, and I can tell you right now, that is a completely false statement that online D&D, you can't replicate the experience of an in-person game online. It's a bold-faced lie. What it is it's more difficult, and it's different. And a lot of my experience comes from the fact that when I first got into acting, I did exclusively stage acting. For those of you that don't know, there's technically 2 different kinds of acting, quote unquote. If you want to get really, really particular, there's a lot more than two. Like things like straight plays versus musical theater versus classical. Things like opera and oratorio work is very, very different than even musical theater. And then we can get into the various kind of, television acting is very different from film acting, and independent films are going to be very, very different than like big blockbusters. Like there's a lot. But if you really want to kind of narrow it down to, or not narrow it down, to kind of broaden it into two things, acting on stage is very different to acting on camera. Stage acting requires what's called projection. And a lot of times if you mention projection, most people will assume you're talking about projecting your voice, which is an essential part of stage acting. Even when you're mic'd, which most professionally run theaters will have, at least their main characters will have a mic somewhere. And one of my favorite things in the world, because it's extremely common and people don't realize it's a thing, is one of the easiest ways to mic an actor is to take a mic. Like a lot of people think that all the actors are mic'd by like a lavalier mic on their shirt somewhere. That doesn't really work for a lot of theater productions, because costume changes and stuff like that, you would have to reset your mic every single time. No, what they actually do on theater is they take a mic and you will have a mic belt. And it generally is going to be worn underneath any clothing that you have to change. So you'll have a mic belt, and it's just kind of like an elastic strap a lot of times with Velcro. So you can take it on and off really, really quickly, and it'll hold snugly. So you will have this mic belt, and it will have your mic pack on it. That's where the battery is, and that's where the transmitter is. And then they will snake a mic up your back through your hair, and will glue it right here. And then we'll cover it in makeup, so that once you get about more than about 10 to 15 feet away, which the closest the audience is ever going to get is within that, like your front row, depending on how large the theater is, your front row might get within 10 feet of the actors. Might. If you've got a pit orchestra there, no, they're going to be within 15 to 20 feet. And anyone beyond that can be a lot further. You can't actually see, other than sometimes their foreheads look a little bit weird. You can't actually tell that there's a mic there. But that's where the mic goes, is they just will have it like pasted right in the middle of their forehead. Or sometimes a little bit close to the hairline. But yeah, it's an extremely common thing. And it's also somewhat common to have the ones that are over the ear, and they look kind of gaudy, and I've never been a huge fan of those, but they work very, very well. But anyway, so stage acting requires not only projection of your voice, because even if you're mic'd, you still have to project. The mic can only amplify what you give it. So if you're not projecting, the amplification of it is still going to sound weak. But in addition to that, stage action requires you projecting everything that you're doing. Your movements must be larger. Your facial expressions must be bigger. The emotions that you're trying to get the audience to see and feel must be bigger. Everything about stage acting is bigger and louder, because you have to make sure that the people in the front row are getting the same show as the people in the very back row of the balcony seats. And in order for that to work, you have to project everything. So it's very big. And it's a completely different style of acting. For film acting, everything is much, much smaller, because the camera can get within inches of your face. The camera can pick up every single minor look. It can trace eye lines. It can see you change your breathing patterns. There is so much more that a camera can pick up, and because of that, everything has to be smaller. Because if you're projecting as much as you are on theater, you're going to look really weird, because that's not how real people interact. There's been arguments for a century now, ever since film came out, about who the real actors are. film actors are real because they get to act like real people and they have to have such great fine motor control because the camera can pick up everything. And then stage actors are the real actors because they have to get so in touch with their character that everyone can feel what they're feeling hundreds of feet away. And that's real acting. And it's all a bunch of hogwash. But it is a very, very different experience. And one of the most difficult things for a lot of stage actors to learn when they switch to film is how much more difficult it is to emote to a camera. And there are a lot of different ways that actors try to get around this. Some of them just basically kind of bite the bullet and have to learn how to basically anthropomorphize a camera and imagine that the camera is your scene partner and that it's giving you all of the things that you need. Because anytime you're working with anyone, you can bring as much energy as you want. If your scene partner is not giving you that energy back, it's going to be a bad performance. And you personally are going to look bad. Even though it's the other person that's not really doing their job, acting is collaborative. Everybody is in it together. When you switch to film, if you're filming a close-up or something like that, a lot of times you're talking to nothing. And I remember once, the one time I got paid to act. I was an extra in a film called The Road to Emmaus. It's actually on YouTube. And if you look real close, you can see a very, very, very young version of me towards the end. I think I'm on screen for maybe a couple of seconds, and you see my hand waving. And I think you can even hear me say, your grief has made you mad, or something similar to that. Oh yeah, I improvised that line right on set. We were in set for 9 hours. The entire scene that we're in lasts a grand total of, I think, 10 minutes, maybe 5. 9 hours to shoot that. Anyway, at the end of that scene, the actor playing Jesus, it's a religious movie for those of you that don't recognize the name Road to Emmaus. The actor playing Jesus has to basically address the camera. And as he was doing that, the actor themselves was really, really brilliant. He actually was a professor at a local college for acting. And he was a brilliant, brilliant actor. I was really, really pleased. Just of the brief bits of interaction that I got to have with him. And being an extra, you don't get to actually talk to the talent. Like extras are corralled, and like I kid you not, extras are not treated super, super well in the industry in general. And for the life of me, I can't remember the guy that played Jesus, but he was a super phenomenal guy. Did not treat us as those. He was great. The whole production was really, really awesome. It was the first and only time I got paid to act. But they treated me super well. I remember sitting back with a bunch of the other extras, and they're all talking about the different stuff that they had done. And it finally gets to me, and I'm like, this is the first thing I've ever done. And I felt just really kind of inadequate next to all of them. And one of the other guys, just without missing a beat, goes, yeah, and look, we all have the exact same title. So don't worry about it. This is your first gig. Congratulations. Welcome to acting. Eventually, you'll have stories like this as well. That's how it works. We all had our first gig once. And I will never, ever forget that person that I never learned their name. He was really cool. He was a really nice guy. I have no idea who he was. To this day, if he was to like show up at my front door and go, hey, remember me? We were in the Road to Emmaus together. I would go, I have no idea who you are. I can't even remember his face anymore. But he's one of the nicest dudes I've ever met. And he was really, really great for me. Going back to that, what this actor did was the director, seeing that he was having a little bit of a hard time kind of emoting to the camera, the director goes, what if I just do this? And what the director did is he went and he crouched down literally right next to the camera. And he had the camera here, and he just put his face right next to the camera. So the camera wouldn't pick him up at all, because the camera won't pick up anything until you're pretty far ahead of it. And so he just was literally right next to the camera, so that if the actor needed to, he could make eye contact with the director instead of the camera, and it would still look like the actor was talking to camera. And that's not an unheard of technique in film acting if you have to address the camera for whatever reason. A lot of times they'll do things like they'll just take a face, like they'll print out a face of someone and put it next to the camera, or other things like that. Or one of the tips I've been given is to look past it if you're not good at just looking into a dark void. I just got from doing YouTube for so long, I've just gotten very used to talking to a camera like it's a real person, mostly because I'm mentally unstable. But that, the reason I'm talking about all this, that is the same problem that most DMs have when they transition from running in-person games to online games. It is exceptionally easier to emote to another human being because they will emote back. And it makes it just much, much easier to be able to put yourself fully into it, because when you are running an in-person game, the rest of the players there are your scene partners. It is really, really easy to derail an in-person game if you've got one person that's just not into it at all. It's the same thing as if you are on a stage and you're acting and you just have one person that's just checked out of the scene for whatever reason. Maybe they don't have a line for like another 5 minutes or something, and so they're in their own head trying to remember their lines or something, and they're just checked out of the scene. It can bring the entire scene down. So yes, the idea of running a game in person, it is significantly easier to get your emotions and everything, because you can feed off the emotions of the other people at the table. Whereas when you're online, you are acting to a camera, which again, actors have been doing since, I think, the 20s or 30s is when like film really started becoming a regular thing. And now we've been doing it so long that theater in general, up until maybe like 15 years ago, was seeing a huge downturn in revenue and people actually going out to theater. And a lot of theater actors were blaming film actors because, people didn't want to go all the way out to the theater, and theater tickets are more expensive than film tickets, and there's a whole culture around watching a theater production versus watching a film, and you normally don't get to have popcorn and all those other things. So yeah, but the idea that somehow theater is always better than film acting, or film actors can just never get the same results as a theater actor because they don't have physical scene partners there, is bollocks. It's absolute nonsense. And again, having trained as a theater actor and then transitioned to film acting training, that's one of the first things that you learn is film acting is a different beast. You have to use different techniques, and you need to learn how to emote to an inanimate object. But once you do that, you can get incredible performances. Now, there is some slight differentiation between film acting and running online tabletop RPGs in the idea that film acting, you still get other people around you. Unless you're doing CGI stuff, which is becoming the new normal. And actors are finding it incredibly difficult to do. I believe Sir Ian McKellen, when they were making the Hobbit films, almost dropped out of them because due to the fact that they were no longer using forced perspective to make him look taller, they were literally having him act on green screen sets, and they were digitally adding him into most of the shots. He wasn't acting with anyone. He was acting by himself, and he hated it. He was considering just giving up on the entire thing because it wasn't the acting that he was used to. And again, Sir Ian McKellen has such a long acting record, and he's done a lot of theater, and so he's very, very talented, but it's a very, very different situation. The same thing is true about running games online. It's not the same as running in-person games. It is more difficult, but it's still very doable. one of my proudest moments, the end of Realms of the Wild. Realms of the Wild was my Zelda RPG that I ran for Zelda Universe for 5.5 years. At the end, the final episode of Realms of the Wild, I had spent, again, 5.5 years constructing this thing, and we'd gotten to meet these characters, and we all loved them. And at the end of Realms of the Wild, we got to do... we got to sunset the characters. If you're not familiar with that term, sunsetting the characters is basically, it's not killing them off. It's basically going, their adventures are over now. This is how kind of the rest of their life goes. So you can kind of say goodbye to the character and understand that they get to live the rest of their life, not always feeling like they're about to die, not saving the world. And this is what they did after that. And sunsetting is a really emotional thing for a lot of people, because especially if you've been running a campaign for a long time, you get attached to these characters. And again, we've been playing these characters for 5.5 years. And so while we're doing the final part of the final battle, and then I'm narrating the after effects of the battle, and then we start to sunset the characters, my players were crying with joy. They were so touched with how we were able to basically make up nonsense about imaginary people that have never existed, about imaginary cultures that have never existed. And yet they were so invested in it, and they were so happy that they were literally weeping. And it is one of the most proud moments I've ever had as a game master, because if you can run a campaign that your players are so invested in that when the campaign does finally come to an end, that they actually experience strong emotions, strong enough that they start weeping, like that is the ultimate compliment to a game master. And the idea that somehow, because we played it exclusively online, we never played a single session with other people in the room. I have actually never met physically excuse me. So I have never actually physically met a single member of that cast. We live all over the States. One of them is actually only a few hours away. But I've never had a chance to physically meet them. I've never been in the same room with any of them. And yet we had an incredibly immersive, wonderful experience. I've had other situations, like one of my players had to leave a game because they'd become a nurse, and nurses don't actually get free time. And as soon as he told me, I'm like, oh yeah, no, totally, I completely understand. And he told me flat out, I was like, this is my favorite character I've ever played. And if I remember correctly, he actually had been playing for a decent amount of time. This was not his first campaign in any shape or form. He's like, I have never felt as connected to a character as I feel with this. And again, not only have I never met that particular person in mind, because he didn't use a face cam, I don't even know what he looks like. Never actually seen that. But through using different techniques and putting emphasis on different aspects, I have run just as engaging RPGs as any you're going to find at a physical table. Is it exactly the same? No. In the same way that a theater show, if you've watched Matilda the Musical on Broadway and then you watched Matilda the Musical on Netflix, they're two very different shows. Same is true about the 2003 Phantom of the Opera versus, it may still be, I can't remember. It was the longest running show in Broadway history for a little while. You could always go, and I've seen Phantom of the Opera live on Broadway. It's an amazing show. But they're very, very different. Does that mean somehow that the movie version is worse? No, it's different. And the fact that it's the movie version isn't the reason that it's different. The same thing is true about the old West Side Story from the 60s. I've seen West Side Story multiple times live. The West Side Story movie from the 60s with Natalie Wood, and I can't remember any of the other actors, but I remember Natalie Wood, is phenomenal. It's one of my favorite pieces of cinema ever. And the same thing is true about virtual tabletop games. They're not the same as in-person games. It doesn't mean that they're worse. It doesn't mean that you can't develop the exact same emotional response to it, that you can't have as much fun, that you can't emote the same way, that you can't create the same experience in a different way, but you have to do it differently. Film acting classes have helped me immensely. Film acting study. I never took a film acting class. I'm mostly a self-taught film actor. But I've done a lot of research in books and all these other things to learn how to do it. So your mileage may vary. But again, yeah, I hate this idea that, well, online D&D is just worse D&D. It's the bad version. If you have to, then I guess you can do that. But you're never going to have a real D&D experience until you play in person. It's a complete fabrication. And it's just based on the idea that it's harder and it requires a completely different skill set. And yeah, so again, this is not me critiquing Dungeon Craft or his video. The reason I'm putting his video in there, first of all, so I can tag him, just because Dungeon Craft, if you're watching this, I would love to have a conversation with you, do a podcast, do a stream, record a video together. I would be absolutely thrilled. To this part of it. And the other reason is just, I don't think he was quote unquote wrong about this, because he simply believes what everybody else in the space believes. Yes, this is the bad version of RPGs. It's not. But if you go into it thinking that, well, all of the skills I learned running in person games are going to translate 100%, and any that don't translate, we just give up on because there's no way that we can compensate for that. No, that is bad thinking. There are so many ways that you can make your online tabletop games just as personal, just as engrossing, just as intimate as any in-person game. And I know from years of experience, it is very, very possible. It just takes different techniques, and you have to be willing to work at it. Again, it's the same thing as a theater actor deciding, well, I want to go to film, and then just not learning any film acting techniques and going, well, I guess film just sucks. So I'm just never going to do film again. Or anytime I do film, it's just gonna suck because film sucks. And that's the bad kind of acting. That mindset fueled a divide between theater actors and film actors for almost 100 years. And it was based on pure poppycock. It was just that, well, this is different. And different isn't bad. It's just different. And if you want to rely on the skills you learned in one field in the other, that's great. But you also have to understand that you're going to have to learn new things. Just because you're a big fish over here doesn't mean you're going to be that same big fish in this different field. And a lot of people don't like that. I'm a masterful in-person dungeon master, and I have a hard time getting people to listen to me online. So online is just bad. It can't be that I don't know what I'm doing. I have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of dungeon mastering experience. Obviously, it's the medium. No. Get off. And again, this is not directed at Dungeon Craft. I think he's a wonderful, phenomenal person that every so often is wrong, like everybody. This is just this overarching mentality in the tabletop RPG space. Online games are not the bad kind of RPGs. They are different. They require different skills. And so because of that, it is more difficult for most DMs to run online than it is to run in person, because all of the advice that exists for in-person games. And most of the heavy hitters in the RPG space cut their teeth in person because online games didn't exist. I mean, 10 years ago, they were new. Like, Roll20 was in its infancy when I first started doing this. And the first games that I ran, I didn't use Roll20. I used Google Plus Hangouts, which doesn't even exist anymore. But that's how I ran my first online game, was doing a Google Plus Hangout. It was done entirely theater of the mind. And it was an amazing experience that everybody loved. But it's very different than in person. And so, yeah, every time I hear this, not even debated, it's just accepted. Yes, online games are never going to be as good as in-person game. Wrong. Absolutely 100% wrong. They're just different. And we have too many people that are leaders in the industry that are kind of fueling this idea that there is no question, it's always worse. And I hate that. It shouldn't be. Now, again, I have a vested interest in this. My disability makes it impossible for me to run in-person games. So if I really wanted to, I could, start bringing ableism arguments into this. But to be perfectly honest, there was never an ableist argument between theater acting and film acting, and the rift still existed. And I do not believe that the people that think that, yeah, online tabletop is just worse, I do not believe that they're coming at that from an ableism standpoint. They're not thinking about people that have disabilities that make it very difficult for them to make it to in-person games. That has never crossed their mind. They're only thinking, I am very good at this version, and I'm not very good at this version. Therefore, there's something wrong with this version because I'm a master at this one. And they should be the same because it's the same game. And it's not. It never has been. So we need to get past this idea that online tabletop gaming is bad. Or that you're never going to be able to do. You are. You have to use a completely different set of skills. A lot of the stuff that you do learn as an in-person DM can be translated to online. And there are some things that are one-to-one translations. Building maps in person versus online, all you have to do is get the right map making program. Being able to do all your prep work, being able to write stories and stuff like that, build characters, all that stuff is a one-to-one translation. But it's as soon as you are running the game that everything starts changing. You have to learn how to look at the camera and not look at the Zoom call where your face is. That is an extremely difficult thing to learn. I cannot tell you how many times I've done this. Or one of the other things I'll do is I'll look at the timer just to see how long I'm going. And you guys can always tell when my eyes are not directly on you because I have a camera. My camera is barely over an arm's length away. Like there's another, I want to say 6 inches from me to the camera right there. So my camera is very, very close to me, as are most webcams. So whenever I look even just slightly off, you guys can tell instantly that I'm doing that. And that changes immersion. That breaks down immersion. Mood music is useful at the tabletop. It is necessary online. Your descriptive phrases have to be different for online tabletop games versus in person. Being able to run the game effectively, because Zoom calls and things like that, there's a delay, people are much less likely to talk over each other. And so it's very, very easy for players to just be completely forgotten and never be able to interact or not be able to interact anywhere near as much. So as a DM, you have to understand how to watch people while you're playing and see who looks like they want to interact but just keeps getting cut off or for whatever reason. There's so much that goes into running an online tabletop game that just doesn't happen in person. And that doesn't mean that this is the worst version. It just means that you have to look at different things. You have to run the game differently. And yeah, so this is one of the few things where I get really, really passionate about it because first of all, I have problems with misinformation in general due to having been gaslit and all these other abuse things from my history. So anytime I hear someone saying something that is patently false, my brain goes crazy. And then this is also acting. This is also presentation, and stuff that I've spent decades learning and perfecting in my own life. Like this is my expertise. This is one of the few things that I'm still good at, even with all the disabilities and stuff. So I'm going to be very, very passionate about it. So Dungeon Craft, again, if you are watching this, I sincerely would love to have an actual conversation about this. Like we could do a Zoom call or something like that. We could do a live stream, whatever would be super cool for you. I would love to sit down and just talk about this and get your ideas on it and my ideas, and give people a much more balanced approach to it. Because again, I think that you agree with the statement that you made, that it's running RPGs online is just not the same. Again, that is not a knock against you or anything like that, but I would love, because again, I believe you have more actual D&D experience than I do. I only have about a decade's worth of experience, but in that decade, I got a lot of work in. I was generally running at least 2 or 3 campaigns every year for those 10 years, in addition to doing conventions and all these other things. Or anyone else in the tabletop RPG space, if this video blows up for whatever reason, I would love to be on the Eldritch Lorecast. I'd love to talk to any of the major D&D or the tabletop RPG YouTubers is out there. I realize I'm a super tiny channel, but I'm working on that. Anyway, that's gonna be all for me today. I will see you guys tomorrow. All right? Bye-bye.